Welcome to APM's 50th Anniversary Speaker Series. For this program, the last in a series of 4 events, will focus on the complex and serious subject of child protective services. We'll also welcome for an informative and candid conversation child safety activist and best-selling author Elizabeth Smart. Ms. Smart will join our panel of experts to discuss the topic of childhood trauma, including Waleska Maldonado, Chief of Prevention for the City of Philadelphia's Office of Children and Youth; John Rubin, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, Pennsylvania Department of Human Services; and our moderator, Dr. Cindy Christian, attending physician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and the Anthony A. Latini Endowed Chair in the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. This program is made possible by the generous support of our diamond sponsors, PICO, and Villanova Insurance Partners.
Our neighbors are eager for progress. We've seen it. For over 50 years, we've watched our neighbors working hard to get where they want to be, taking steps to move forward in their lives. Our neighborhood is artistic, welcoming, diverse, hardworking, relaxing, athletic, and lively. However, Philadelphia has had its fair share of issues to overcome.
Since 1970, APM has been here to help people with these issues. APM's philosophy is simple. If we help our neighbors, we help their families. If we help their families, we help our community.
Asociación Puertorriqueños en Marcha for Everyone was created when a group of Puerto Rican Vietnam veterans returned home and found that their community was in need.
Our neighborhood is better because a few people took a look around at these socioeconomic issues and said, we're not going to let this happen to our neighbors.
Our neighbors are brave, determined people, and APM is here to help.
What started as a staff of 5, housed in a Germantown Avenue storefront, has changed to a massive network of social services in over 10 sites throughout North Philadelphia.
At APM, we don't just work in the community, we are the community. Many of our neighbors work at APM. Today, we employ over 400 multilingual, multicultural professionals, and we serve more than 40,000 people each year.
For years, APM has implemented programs to address the issue of food insecurity in our area. We've worked hard to provide our neighbors with access to healthy foods, even building a cousin's grocery store in the middle of what was then a food desert. We provide assistance in home buying for those who need a permanent place to stay. Many of those homes we've even built ourselves. For the kids of our community, we have an early education program where they can learn essential skills.
Though predominantly Puerto Ricanos, we're here for everyone. So we provide a wide range of services to benefit the whole community.
Our mental health facilities and drug rehabilitation centers provide a community of support for our neighbors fighting addiction.
We cover everything from foster care and children's services to community development, building assets for families and their community.
Besides our core programs, we stretch our funding to sponsor community events like neighborhood cleanup days and short-term service projects.
APM is still around today because the people of the community look at all the issues and say, we're not going to let that happen to our neighbors. We will be here as long as families need us.
Because if we can help families, we can help our community.
And if we can help our community, then we can help our city.
Esteemed guests, honored colleagues, friends, and neighbors, welcome to the APM's 50th Anniversary Speaker Series. And now, to offer opening remarks, APM President and CEO, Ms. Nilda Ruiz.
Welcome to our final presentation in our first one of four-part APM speaker series commemorating our 5 decades of service and commitment to the betterment of the Hispanic and all underserved communities in our city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, Philadelphia. This year, APM marks 5 decades of community engagement with the speaker series that focus on our 4 important service areas: behavioral health, child education, economic development, and today's subject, child protective services. Each represents our dedication and our direction as we offer Philadelphia families the opportunity to achieve their greatest potential. Our first event featured actress and author Mackenzie Phillips to address behavioral health. We then welcomed Sesame Street Sonia Manzano for a discussion on early childhood education. Last month, we were joined by ABC News correspondent John Quiñones with a lively discussion about community and economic development. And today, we'll conclude our series welcoming our special guest, child safety activist Elizabeth Smart, along with an impressive panel of experts on the serious and complex subject of childhood trauma. Today's conversation will likely be difficult and even painful discussion, but we offer this safe space with the hope of a profound encounter of learning and sharing. All of the speaker series presentations are available on our website at apmphila.org, and I invite you to watch them to understand the magnitude of the work that APM does on a daily basis and has done for the past 50 years. We're very proud of the accomplishments and want to share these insightful events with you. Before we begin, I'd like to take a few moments to offer my gratitude for the dedication and commitment of our tireless leadership, our vice presidents, directors, including our Chief Operating Officer, Manuel Delgado, and our Chief Financial Officer, Chanel Hans. I'm also grateful to our industrious and conscientious board of directors. Finally, my sincere thanks to the dedication and commitment of our staff, who are always willing to go that extra step in aiding families. And yes, you all must know by now how challenging it is to create an event. And it's even more challenging during a pandemic. This amazing effort has been led by our hardworking host committee. Many thanks, muchísimas gracias. A very special note of gratitude to our community partners that are supporting this event, including Villanova Insurance Partners and our good friend, Mike Holland. And many thanks to our community partner, PICO. My special gratitude to Ramona Vesco Benson, Kia Branson Davis, and PICO trustee and good friend, Judge Nelson Diaz. Let's take a look at this short message about our community partner, PICO.
At PICO, we understand that a lot has changed. Like where you get a haircut and who does it. Where new lessons are learned and new careers are found, and even new ways to run your business. But no matter how much things change, you can depend on PICO to be there with the energy and help you need to power through.
Thank you. Our goal is to offer Philadelphia families the tools necessary to live healthy lives and thrive for generations to come. We thank PICO and all our supporters for being valuable drivers in APM achieving our goals. It's been said that how a society treats its most vulnerable members, the elderly, the needy, and its children, is the measure of its humanity. This is true during times of prosperity, but even more so during times of strife. If and when, as a community, we mistreat or ignore these most vulnerable among us, we lose our way, we lose our soul. In 2006, the city was heartbroken upon learning of a horrific death of Danielle Kelly, a 13-year-old girl afflicted with cerebral palsy, bedridden under the care of her parents and the city's Department of Human Services employees. Danielle literally starved to death due to indifference on the part of non-caring relatives and too many child protective service employees involved that truly no one was accountable. It tore the matrix of the child protective services. The response created a positive change in the oversight where one entity would be held accountable. The creation of the Improved Outcomes for Children initiative was birthed. The new strategy was simple and effective, a community neighborhood approach with clearly defined roles between county and provider staff that would impact the safety and the well-being of a child. The goal of the IOC, were stated as follows: more children will be maintained safely in their own homes and communities. More children will achieve timely reunification or a permanent situation. There will be a reduction in the rate of children placed in congregate care, and child and family functioning will be improved. Since 2013, APM has been part of the initiative as a community umbrella agency, also known as CUA. You'll soon meet the director of APM's CUA, who will share more details about the program. We've all heard the African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. With CUA, we believe it takes a community to protect a child. We take this responsibility seriously and to heart. Our strategy is both intervention and prevention, each with a direct encouragement with the family for an understanding of their needs. This CUA is built on a theory that a more effective child protective services must minimize the disruption in a child's life by keeping a child in their school and their familiar surroundings, their community, close to their parents to facilitate visits, all being coordinated by one case manager. APM's CUA began with offering services to about 1,400 children and to over 675 families. We've reduced this number to 750 children in 440 families. While I'm very proud that we've stabilized the lives of 650 children, today, with children not being able to attend school without teachers or others questioning a child's welfare, more children may be at risk. We have been slowly decreasing since before the pandemic, but once the pandemic ends, I fear we may have an influx of children in need. CUA also supports prevention, offering services to families in crisis to transition out of the system, and programs like the Parent Cafe to encourage group discussion, as well as events for families that are not in the system to focus on family interaction and bonding. These are family fun activities such as movie nights with popcorns and a movie like Surrounding. Also, we do stargazing nights with huge telescopes that are loaned to us by the Franklin Museum. CUA truly confronts the issues from all sides. Also, our agency has 350 certified foster homes through our foster care and adoptions department, known as Pradera, run by the phenomenal Susan Plaza, whom you'll meet later. We've placed over 400 children into adoption. This number may sound enormous, and it is, but it's only a reflection of the enormity of the problem. Just in Philadelphia, there's over 7,182 children in the system, and this is down from over 10,000 children. As you're listening to today's panel discussion, I hope you'll open your hearts to the possibility of fostering or adopting. My husband and I adopted 2 children out of the foster care system, and they've brought such great joy into our lives and our home. Why is APM successful in this critical, crucial community arena? Having been founded by members of the community and being part of the community for 5 decades, our cultural competence allows us to understand the community and its challenges. Child abuse and can and does have many flashpoints, including addictions, mental health issues, economic challenges, generational abuse, and even religious beliefs. It's also a sad fact that child abuse disproportionately affects minority children. We offer our services to address these needs in a culturally competent manner. We offer our services bilingually. Also, I feel that many of us at APM know firsthand the importance of the family unit, the need for a sense of belonging. These children belong to our community, and we will do whatever we need to so that we can nurture them and offer them a safe place to heal and thrive. It does take a community to protect a child. And in my estimation, it takes a superhero to oversee the work we do to service and protect our most precious community members, our children. So now, please join me to continue our program in welcoming APM's own superhero, Community Umbrella Agency Director, Kiana Hunter.
Thank you, Nilda, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Today's topic of childhood trauma is one that is very heavy and for many taboo. However, this conversation is needed so that awareness can be brought to this issue. Child Protective Services strive to strengthen and preserve families within their communities. The child welfare system is designed to help children in their own homes, make efforts to preventing abuse and neglect, and as a last resort, provide adequate out-of-home care. APM's team of directors, supervisors, case managers, and support staff provide child protective services to children in high-risk populations. We cover the most economically depressed and highest crime rate area in the city, the North Philadelphia 24th and 26th police districts. Our staff is dedicated and they're hardworking professionals with degrees in social work, sociology, psychology, and criminal justice. They have a burning passion to protect and serve every child. It's tough, emotional work, a real 24/7 job. APM also partners with other child welfare providers, nonprofits, mental health agencies, and housing agencies to reach the best outcome for the child. Always with the aim of family stabilization and reunification. The annual Pennsylvania Child Protective Service report of 2019 found that across the state, there were 4,865 substantiated Child Protective Services or CPS reports. Of those substantiated reports, Philadelphia County had 800. CPS reports consist of children from birth to 17 years old who experienced but not limited to the following categories: physical abuse, sexual abuse, serious mental injury, or trafficking. Pennsylvania also received over 41,000 valid GPS reports, also known as General Protective Service, in 2019. Out of those valid reports, Philadelphia had 3,918. GPS reports are those of neglect, lack of supervision, domestic violence, caregiver substance abuse, and inadequate basic needs. The Performance Management and Technology Division of DHS Philadelphia is currently conducting an entry and disproportionality study, which is taking a closer look into the racial disproportionality within children in out-of-home care. So far, the study finds that higher reports come from the neighborhoods of North, Lower Northeast, West, and Southwest areas of Philadelphia. 71% of the residents in these higher reporting areas are non-Hispanic Black. This is compared to the 66% of the residents in the lower reporting areas that are non-Hispanic White. Now that you have heard a very small portion of the reporting and statistics, we now have to figure out, as a community, how can we each contribute to raising children who thrive despite adversity? We in the child welfare community work to improve the safety, permanency, and well-being of children and families in our care. But all too often, it is an unfortunate truthism that children in the child welfare system experience long-lasting trauma, either from their caregivers or from a system that practices a one-size-fits-all approach. And now, I'm pleased to introduce our special guest, Elizabeth Smart, child safety activist and best-selling author, who will join our moderator, Dr. Cindy Christian, for an insightful conversation. Elizabeth Smart was 14 years old when a child predator broke into her family's Utah home and kidnapped her at knife point while her younger sister pretended to sleep. An immediate massive search failed to find Elizabeth. It would be 9 long months until the arrest of the kidnappers. Ms. Smart has documented her experiences in the best-selling book, My Story, and recently authored another inspiring book about what it takes to overcome trauma and reclaim one's life, titled Where There's Hope. It's a heartfelt guide for readers to make peace with the past and embrace the future. Our monitor, Dr. Cindy Christian, is a respected leader in the field of child maltreatment. She's named to the Anthony A. Latini Endowed Chair in the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Currently, she is the chair of the Department of Human Services HUA Oversight Board. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Cindy Christian and Elizabeth Smart.
Deanna, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And Elizabeth, it is a pleasure to meet you and welcome you virtually to Philadelphia, the wonderful birthplace of America. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and us, share your story, and help educate our community about child maltreatment and sexual abuse. Elizabeth, your story is extraordinary. And I imagine that many in our audience know something about your 9-month kidnapping and abuse, but not enough. You are remarkable in your ongoing efforts to take your personal past story and use lessons from that ordeal to help others. And while your story is unique, you and I know that every story is unique and that there are universal themes that we can extract from your personal story. I want to ensure that we highlight some of these themes together in our short amount of time. In thinking about this conversation, I condensed some of these universal themes to 6 simple words, which I hope to explore together. These words are manipulation, fear, shame, trauma, control, and resilience. I know you have thoughts about all of these issues. So let's begin. I'm going to start with manipulation. Whether child sexual abuse involves physical violence, as in your life, or non-violent acts, which is very common, all child sexual abuse involves the coercion and manipulation of a child by their perpetrator or perpetrators. Can you talk about manipulation and how you are ultimately able to recognize this manipulation and use it against your perpetrators, which is really quite remarkable? Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Yes, I think you summed up those themes perfectly, very succinctly. And manipulation, I think what is so dangerous about manipulation is that you can manipulate almost, well, I'm not going to say anyone, but a child into doing almost anything. And that is exactly what happened to me. I grew up in a very conservative Christian community, and I was kidnapped shortly after 9/11 happened. So I feel like everyone was extra sensitive at that time towards any form of extremism. And my captors found that the best way to manipulate people was through religion. I mean, they fed off of people's fears. And were they ever questioned or anything was ever commented to them about how they appeared or how they acted, they'd always turn back to this was part of my religion. And they found that it worked so well in public that they started even encompassing that in their private life as well, to the point where he knew he wanted to kidnap me. He planned on kidnapping me. And his wife not only was okay with it, but encouraged it. And just for reference, she had a prior marriage. She had 6 children of her own before she married my captor. So to think that this woman was, I'm not going to give her the honor to bestow her with the title of mother currently, but she had been a mother once in her life. And yet she was able to be completely manipulated into encouraging my captor to go out and kidnap me and then to rape me every day. She was a party of that. And so manipulation is, I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. It's almost, I feel like, a crime that goes unpunished in and of itself because of how damaging and destructive it is.
Yeah. One of the things you just said, which is so true, and I when I teach, I always say that child sexual abuse children, they comply with so many things, but they can't consent because they really don't have a mature understanding about what perpetrators are asking them to do or coercing them to do. So thank you so much. That these are all incredible issues, and you really did turn that manipulation against your perpetrators. If we have time later, maybe we can come back to that, but it was really amazing. I want to turn to my next word, and that is the word fear. Many child victims of abuse experience fear for themselves, for their families, in part because of overt or covert threats. Children fear that somebody will find out. And because they're developmentally egocentric, they fear that they will get in trouble if somebody finds out. Children don't want to get in trouble. In your situation, you actually feared being discovered. Can you talk about the fear you experienced during your 9-month captivity and what lessons you have learned from others about fear?
I feel like this is such an important topic. So many people over the years have asked me, well, why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you do this? And for years and years and years, I would feel so defensive when someone would ask me a question saying, well, why didn't you run? And as with a little more life experience behind me and a little bit more understanding, I feel like I can better articulate it. And I think I have more understanding and compassion for the asker, because why wouldn't you be curious? Why wouldn't you want to know? I think curiosity is only a natural part of being human. But as a young teenager, and for the years after I was rescued, when I heard the words, why didn't you? Instead, I heard the words, you should have, and you didn't try hard enough. It must not have been that bad. But the truth is, when I was kidnapped, no one was there to protect me. No one was there to rescue me. I mean, as my introduction stated, a massive search was put on for me that extended for months, and yet no one could find me. And I was barely over 3 miles away from my home. And so it seemed like my captors were, well, omnipotent. I mean, it just seemed like they were invincible, that they could get away with anything. They could do anything they wanted. I mean, he raped me multiple times every day and nobody stopped him. He withheld food from me and no one was there to give me food. He withheld water from me. He forced me to go naked. I mean, he chained me up. He did all of these things and no one was ever there to protect me from him. So when he would make the threats to me that if you don't do exactly as I say, I'm going to kill you or I'm going to kill your family, I absolutely complied because I had no reason to doubt him. I mean, he was able to break into the place that I thought was most safe and secure on earth, my home, find me in my bedroom, wake me up in the middle of the night out of my bed, and take me away into the mountains. And he was able to penetrate that deep. So why wouldn't he be able to do it again? I mean, why wouldn't he just be able to go and kill my sister or one of my brothers or my parents? And for me, I had decided early on that the one thing that would be worth surviving for, the one thing that would be worth living for, would be to see my family again, to be with them again, and to feel their love again. And if they weren't there, then there would be no point in surviving. So when we're talking about fear and what it has the power and ability to do over a child, it absolutely prevented me from screaming. It prevented me from running, from trying to escape. I always wanted to. There was nothing I wanted more than to never see my captors ever again. But that fear was so real and such an active, present part in my life. I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't just pretend like it wasn't there. I mean, it very much played a strong role in the manipulation and control over me.
That your story is just so harrowing. But for all children who are victims of abuse, they carry a constant fear. And I think that we all need to recognize that, especially when we have children who are verbal, but they're too scared to tell anybody what's going on in their lives or in their household. I want to move on to another important word, and that's shame. Kind of goes with some of that fear. For most people, shame is a very powerful negative emotion. Many victims of abuse feel tremendous shame, which can have really terrible consequences throughout their lives, both mentally and physically, and can last into adulthood. What do you want to tell our audience about shame and sexual abuse?
We could spend all day talking about this topic because I feel so passionately about it. First of all, I would want to speak to every survivor out there and say that what has happened to you is not your fault. And I don't care if it's from a family member, a spouse, a significant other. I don't care if you are a prostitute walking down the street naked. Nobody deserves to be raped. Nobody deserves to be hurt. That blame and that shame should land solely on the perpetrator. And as I've spoken with so many victims and as I've gone to so many states and heard so many stories, and it is, can't even begin to tell you how often I've heard them say, well, I didn't stop it immediately. I didn't scream no, like it was someone I knew, it was someone that I love. And so things just started going, and then things were already going. It was too late for me to say stop, or it didn't happen. And those situations, that is still rape, that is still sexual violence. I don't think so many people realize actually how powerful we are individually, and how you absolutely have the right over your body and who touches you and who does not. And you should be able to say, no, this is not okay at any point in time, and be respected enough to have the other person stop. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And I think it's so easy to blame ourselves before we blame anyone else, especially if you're already in a vulnerable situation. Whether it's, maybe you don't have all the support that you deserve in life. Maybe it is from someone that you know. Maybe it was from someone who should be the person protecting you. That, I mean, I wish everyone had equal support. I wish every community could come together for each and every child. I mean, have loved the whole message of APM, of rebuilding families, because families build a community builds a city, and cities are what make our country. And so that resonated, the video that they played just resonated with me so deeply, because every family deserves that. Every child deserves that. And to have that support. And I feel like the only way to overcome that shame is through support. And it's so important. I don't know how you can heal and move forward with your life after experiencing trauma without support.
I think you've answered in part. My next question was really about trauma. And it's not only the trauma of the victim, but it's also those around the victim. In your case, your sister was a witness to your abduction, and your parents, your siblings, and relatives were all tremendously impacted. In your travels, what have you learned a little bit more? Just talk a little more about the importance of family trauma and family support. And I think you've touched on that already.
So trauma, you are absolutely right. Trauma doesn't just affect the one victim. In a sense, we all become victims, and we all feel, whether you're a friend or a family member or even just someone in the community. In a sense, we all become victims of these crimes that are happening. because they shouldn't be happening, and they draw us in. And like, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I can't even watch the news anymore. I've got 3 little kids, and anytime anything comes up on the news with a child, I like start crying, and I get even more anxious about my own children. I mean, I'm sure they'd probably tell you I'm a bit too much already, but I can't help myself. And so taking time to acknowledge your pain, having positive relationships in your life, and whether that's with a therapist or a friend or a mentor, is so important. And I would also just like to point out that just because someone comes back, if a child is kidnapped and they're rescued, that does not mean that the trauma ends there. In fact, the trauma can be equal to, and even at times be greater afterwards than what they actually experienced. I mean, depending on what route they go through, how they're received will determine that trauma. I mean, the court systems, it's so important to pursue these cases, but at the same time, it is not a victim friendly place. Speaking firsthand, it is not, it is not victim friendly. It's not pleasant. It is important, however. And so that being said, it is all the more important that as communities, we come together, as families, we come together and we support our victims and we love them. It is so easy for us as victims to hear like, well, we didn't do enough. We didn't try hard enough. Maybe part of us wanted it. So really it's our fault. It's so easy as a victim to somehow hold yourself responsible. And even as a community, I mean, I don't even know how many times I've heard, well, she was out partying and she was already hanging out with a group of guys and they went into their dorm room and then, well, she passed out. So like it was really going to matter. She shouldn't have been drinking so much. She should have stayed with a friend. She should have had a buddy. I mean, I am so sick of hearing these kinds of excuses and answers because there is absolutely nothing that can justify these acts of sexual violence and rape and kidnapping. I'm sorry, but actually, I'm not sorry at all. There's nothing that justifies them.
So we have 2 more questions and only a few more minutes, really. So I'm going to jump over control. You spoke a little bit about that. And I think maybe later on, if we have the time, we can talk about how important it is because these children have no control while they're abused, or even the systems that are meant to protect them don't give them a lot of control. But thinking about the control that victims do need, it will be important. But I want to go to my last question because I think it's a positive one. But I'll start with this, that when children are victims of sexual abuse, they often feel broken and helpless. I think shattered is a word that you've used to describe your early feelings in your abduction. And these feelings in children can manifest many ways, sometimes depression and withdrawal, or anger and acting out, poor school performance, risk-taking behaviors. You've touched on many of these. But these feelings have not defined you. And in fact, what happened to you has not defined you. Can you speak to us a little bit about your own resilience and what you have learned about resilience from others for our audience?
Absolutely. And I mean, first of all, I have to say thank you to everyone who has ever prayed for me, has ever searched for me, who has ever spared a thought for me, because it did make a difference. And so I want to say thank you. And I also just want to say that every child deserves that same love and attention that I received, which is why I do what I do now, because every child deserves that. And resilience, I think, of all the inspiring things there are in this world, I mean, beautiful masterpieces of artwork and music. I mean, how can you not turn on even the radio and anything that on, still be impressed that someone was intelligent enough and creative enough and organized enough to be able to create that? I mean, we have so much around us to inspire us every day, but at least in my life, what I find the very most inspiring is the human spirit, because we can come back, and it's hard and it's not easy, and you have to fight for it, and you have to want it. You can't just wait for it to happen. You can't just passively hope that it'll happen. I mean, you have to go out and you have to try for it, and you have to believe that it will come in your life, and that, you know, peace is possible and joy is possible, and having strong examples in your life is so important. And not giving up, being able to find, you know, not just the right therapy, but the right therapist. And I feel like I've had like a massive crash course in therapy this past year through my own foundation. I was really interested because there are so many different kinds. And I feel like this is so much information that the general population doesn't know unless you make it a point to learn about. You like, who knew there were so many different kinds of therapy? I didn't. And I have to believe that there is something out there for everyone. And this is not something you have to go through alone. Building those relationships is so important. And that is what's going to help you become resilient. Finding those people that you can positively connect with, that are going to be there for you night and day, that are going to help you so that you do achieve it, so that you do achieve happiness and a zest for life, and being able to move forward and really achieve what your dreams and goals are. I mean, for me, I think the single most important thing is having those positive relationships. And I know I'm repeating myself and probably preaching to the choir, but I feel like I could beat this to the end of the day. But you know, really making sure that I talk about finding your family a lot, because unfortunately, a lot of time abuse that happens comes from people who should be protecting you, comes from people who should love you. And maybe they are blood related, maybe they're not blood related. And so I talk about finding your family because, in my opinion, when someone who's supposed to love and protect you is the person who your nightmares are made of, they're no longer your family. And family are the people who build you up, who support you, who love you, who protect you. And sometimes we are not fortunate or blessed enough to be born into a family, and we have to find them. And sometimes those family members, they might be a teacher, they might be a friend, they might be a friend's parent, they might be your therapist, they might be a community leader. And so sometimes we have to find our family, but I do believe that there is family for all of us. And I absolutely believe that there are none of us that are so broken that we can't come back, that we're not worth coming back, that we're not worth saving. Geez, sorry, I could go on, but
You know what, Elizabeth, you could go on, and I could go on as well, but we have to wrap up this part of the program. But we're going to come back, and I'm going to start out with something that I think is a very important message for you. So thank you so much. This short time went so quickly, and it was just such an honor and a pleasure to talk with you. And I'll see you again in a little bit.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Please welcome APM's Pradera Resource Homes Administrator, Susan Plaza.
Thank you, Elizabeth Smart and Dr. Cindy Christian. What an incredible story. It's amazing how it's been 20 years since this happened to Elizabeth Smart, and still, today it's still a powerful and relevant depiction of childhood trauma, resilience, and recovery from child abuse. Today's Child Protective Services speaker panel focuses on childhood trauma. As we've heard earlier, all too often it is an unfortunate truism that children in the child welfare system experience long-lasting trauma, either from their parents or from a system that has a one-size-fits-all approach. Today, in this climate of COVID-19 pandemic, these challenges have been amplified with added stressors on children, caregivers, and families who have minimal supportive networks available to them. As we've learned earlier, APM and Pradera have a long-standing history in our child welfare community, providing quality, holistic, and trauma-informed services. Our focus is to promote healthy lifestyles, protect and nurture vulnerable children and youth, and empower individuals to have a voice in the future of their communities. APM and Pradera believes that individuals and families can succeed in meeting their highest potential when they are provided with the tools, support systems, focus on overcoming existing barriers and preparing for future ones. As said earlier, and one more time for our record, APM's mission and Perdera's mission is to help families achieve their greatest potential. With our rich experience in the provision of human, health, and social services informed by our more than 40 years of quality service delivery, we are proudly recognized as a leader in our child welfare community. Given our track record, we are leveraging our position to get in front of these challenges, demonstrating our commitment to our constituents, transparency in our work with our partners, and dedication to our core values and mission. Sentimos orgullo. We are proud. We are really proud of our accomplishments and feel poised to move this agenda forward. To this end, we embrace the need for collaboration between the different sectors of our community and are compelled to engage in a dialogue exploring the impact of childhood trauma as a consequence of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, and our collective responsibility to raise children who are resilient and thrive despite adversity. We have assembled a group of leaders representing our city, state, and healthcare partners for our panel. We want to welcome back shortly our moderator, Dr. Cindy Christian, that's a tongue twister, Cindy Christian, who will facilitate a discussion with our subject matter experts as to how we can positively impact the child welfare system, making it more responsive and compassionate to all children. This speaker panel will examine possibilities and solutions. I thank everyone again for the contribution. Elizabeth Smart, your story, Dr. Christian, your on-target, pointed concepts that Elizabeth has expanded on so thoroughly, and to our leadership here at Perdera and APM, our esteemed leader, Nilda Ruiz, and my partner, Kiana Hunter, who I feel really privileged to be part of such a great team here at APM and Perdera. Thank you, and let's continue to enjoy our speaker discussion.
Well, thank you, Susan. And I want to welcome both John Rubin, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, and Waleska Maldonado, who is the Chief of Prevention in the Office of Children and Families in Philadelphia. And Elizabeth, welcome back. I thank you all for being here today. I feel so fortunate to have the opportunity to continue this discussion about child abuse. And I'd actually like to start the discussion where Elizabeth and I left off, because I think it's one of the most important points that Elizabeth often makes. And this is something that's very important for everyone to understand. And that is that children cannot protect themselves nor save themselves from sexual abuse. As she said, the sexual abuse is not the fault of the victim. And Elizabeth, would you like to share any additional thoughts about that at this time?
Just speaking for children, I mean, there's just, using my experience, I grew up in a bubble. There was so much I didn't know about. There was so much I was inexperienced with. And when it happened, it was horrifying. It was shocking. It was unbelievable. And I wanted to hide that away from the world. That was naivete speaking. I think there didn't need to be a big news broadcast saying what happened to me for people to guess what happened to me. But even still, I felt embarrassed and I felt ashamed. And even to a degree, I felt guilty. And if I could feel that way and I was kidnapped out of my bed in the middle of the night, I mean, I can't imagine a much more innocent situation being kidnapped from than that. Then how much more are these other children who maybe knew their perpetrators, or they were someone that they had close contact with them, and that guilt and that shame and embarrassment is so easy to prey on for a predator, for them to control that child. and continue the abuse. And so it's just so important that we all keep our eyes open, that we continue to speak out, and that we continue to have these incredibly difficult but very, very much needed conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much. John, I'm going to turn to you. Welcome. The identification of known or suspected sexual abuse often triggers both the criminal justice system, and if the perpetrator is in a caregiving role for a child, the child welfare system. And over the years, our state has worked diligently to coordinate the work of our child protective services system and law enforcement in the investigation of sexual abuse, but with varying degrees of success. Can you speak to the state's efforts in developing and improving investigations in sexual abuse using child advocacy centers and the potential impact of realizing true interdisciplinary investigation, and specifically also how this approach actually helps children?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Christian. And let me start with that last point first, which is how the Child Advocacy Center approach helps children. First, for anybody not familiar with the CAC approach, it involves a coordinated multidisciplinary approach that provides a trained forensic interviewer to be the one to speak to a child in a non-threatening environment. Back when I was a caseworker, we were sometimes interviewing children in our child welfare office, or they were being interviewed in a police station with well-meaning but minimally trained staff. This is a much better system because children really only have to tell their story once. They're telling their story to a trained interviewer, asking age-appropriate questions. Other professionals, law enforcement, and when I say law enforcement, we're talking police officers and the district attorneys, watching through a mirror, taking their own notes and coordinating a response together. Prior to the CAC, the differences of those organizations, law enforcement and child welfare, we didn't always have the same goals in terms of the investigation. And by now, working together through this model, we are hopefully minimizing the trauma to the child, which I appreciate Elizabeth talking about, and really having better investigations, more coordinated investigations, and minimizing the trauma to the child. I can tell you in Pennsylvania, we continue to enhance this coordination, and although there is still more work to be done. In 2019, I don't have the 2020 numbers yet, but for 2019, I can tell you that there were 16,722 children served at children's advocacy centers in Pennsylvania. So with the full age range up through age 18, the large majority of the kids were there due to allegations of sexual abuse, but some were also interviewed regarding physical abuse, neglect, or even being a witness to violence. And so we have really tried to expand this work. We have a Child Advocacy Center Advisory Committee, the CACAC, that helps coordinate the work of all the CACs. We have about 40 children advocacy centers in the state. And so for anybody not familiar, there are 67 counties. So while there's 40, which is a very positive expansion of our children's advocacy centers, we recognize there's still more work to be done. Our goal would be to have a CAC in every county and not have to have children and their families have to travel an hour or more to get to a CAC. So we have been expanding, we have been working in this manner. We value the coordinated response, the multidisciplinary response, as well as the opportunity, not just for ourselves as professionals to coordinate, but to minimize the trauma that a child would face and to not re-victimize them through the investigative approach.
Yeah, and I think, again, one of the things that Elizabeth and I didn't have a lot of time to talk about, but that loss of control that children have. I always think that when children finally are identified as being victims of sexual abuse, they may, or if they've told someone, they may think that their ordeal is over, but it's not, because then they have to get through the child protective services system and kind of law enforcement, and they're asked to tell their story, and they may be asked to go to court, and they still kind of have this sense that they don't have very much control kind of over what has happened to them. So any control that we can give them and any opportunity to minimize kind of their exposures to things that are embarrassing sometimes for them or hurtful or painful would be really great. Well, Leska, welcome to the panel, and I'm so happy to have you here. You lead the city's prevention efforts in child protection. And I think we can all agree that preventing abuse in all of its forms is really the ultimate goal. But I think that most of the efforts in sexual abuse prevention to date have been focused on the victim. And I always have worried that it's very difficult, if not impossible, for children to protect themselves. Can you share some of the most effective and some new approaches that the city has to offer in child abuse prevention? And are there any novel approaches to sexual abuse prevention that are important for us to consider?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. So overall, we're learning a lot from research and continue to change our approach. For example, we know that when we have persistent and constant stress, it can affect the ability to manage emotions. In our communities, we're seeing that stress is caused by unemployment, the lack of housing, food insecurity, and now, to top it all, the pandemic. If we can minimize the stress that these families are facing, this is, we're able to then reduce the pressure. And this is what we're focusing on, helping families with what we're calling tangible needs. We're connecting families to food, we're connecting them to housing, mental health, primary health care, and making sure that they have what they need to support their children's education. And those are just a few ways we're working to decrease the factors that can create unsafe situations for children. This is the work and focus of the Prevention Division at Philadelphia Department of Human Services. The work includes family empowerment centers where families can go to receive support to address any social economic needs that they face. Out of school time services where kids are empowered through social and emotional learning activities, as well as an array of other case management supports, which all aim at supporting the family and keeping the kids safe. The goal here is to support families to safely care for their children, while at the same time guiding them to resources that support any social economic issue that they might be facing. Now, in regard to sexual abuse prevention efforts, one thing that we have historically done is that we have approached this work by teaching children and youth to recognize sexual abuse, understand and practice ways to protect themselves, as well as practices on how to safely disclose when abuse occurs. However, we have continued to think, and will continue to think differently about how we approach these sensitive challenges facing our young people. We now work very closely with the parents, the mandated reporters, our community umbrella agencies to ensure protective environments are created and fostered. This includes educating key stakeholders to ensure that they're able to identify the signs and risks of child abuse, including child abuse and neglect, substance abuse, and any parental history of victimization. In fact, we're actually working with Philadelphia's Children's Alliance to identify families that are currently involved in our system, in the DHS system, that meet these risk factors to provide them with additional educational support to help them identify the signs of child abuse.
Thank you so much, Waleska. And I always say that kind of the signs of potential abuse in a child are very similar. They are the same really as the signs of any kind of stress. So children are depressed, or they're withdrawn, or they're acting out, or they're having poor school performance. And, we can see the manifestations, but we just don't know the cause. And so being able to talk to children and think broadly about what the possible causes are, because it could be anything from kind of bullying in school to being abused at home. Like, there are just so many different causes, but we have to be alert to them. Elizabeth, I'm going to turn back to you. It took years before you and your family were served justice, and ultimately not the complete justice that was due. Can you talk about what it was like going through that process and the ultimate outcome of your criminal justice case, and looking back, what you might recommend to those in a position to improve the systems for children and families?
That's a great question. I had someone once describe our justice system as, they said, it's not a justice system, it's a legal system, because ultimately I'm not sure that any victim ever truly gets justice. And for the majority of cases that I've either been involved in or I have followed, I would have to say that's true. It's often a very, very difficult thing for a victim to experience, having to go through the justice system, or go through the legal system, having their testimony on the stand and then being cross-examined and possibly having their past brought into question. I mean, it's a job, but it's hard not to take it personally. It's hard to like hear that someone might doubt the truth that you're saying when it's probably already taken a huge step of faith to get to where you are just at that exact moment in time. And so the legal system and justice system is hard. And for me, I mean, my case sat in the state courts, and it was always a question of whether or not he was competent or not. And it got pushed on and it got pushed on. And I remember getting called into the Utah U.S. Attorney's office, and he said, "Well, Elizabeth, what would you like to do? The statute of limitations is almost up. We're approaching the 5-year mark. I would like to present to you the option of taking this on in federal court. Do you want to pursue this in federal court?" And I remember just thinking, well, what will happen to him if it doesn't move out of the state courts? And he said, well, we can't hold him in a prison. We can't hold him in a jail. Maybe we'll be able to hold him in a state hospital. And they'd probably keep him there for a long time, but eventually he would be let out if they deemed him as competent. And I was just shocked that there was no question about what he did. Like, there's no question of his innocence, but that could happen, that even had the possibility of happening. I was like, well, absolutely, I want this moved to the federal courts. I mean, it was a roller coaster ride. I mean, along the way, like, before it was actually moved from the federal courts, my dad was telling me what charges he was going to be faced with, and none of them even include the sexual abuse. And I remember just being so shocked and angry, because although I didn't want to verbally admit that I had been sexually abused, I had, and I'm pretty sure probably everyone naturally assumed that I had. And I was so angry when that was not one of his charges. And I remember saying something to my dad about it, and he said, well, I didn't think you wanted that like public knowledge, first of all. And he's like, and second of all, he's like, it wouldn't actually prolong his sentencing any. And I was so angry. And it was really that point in my life that I was like, well, I don't care anymore. Everyone can know that I was sexually abused, because this is not okay. And I mean, for me, that was a defining moment in my life. And it's true, I don't know all the ins and outs of the courts and every defense or charge someone can be charged with. But I do know that it is a very difficult place to be as a victim. It's exhausting. I mean, emotionally and mentally. It puts a lot of strain. I mean, even at the end of the day, when maybe when the testimony is done for that day, if it spans on over a long period of time, I mean, it's very difficult. I remember sitting in the audience every single day of the trial for Brian David Mitchell, and that went on for almost a month. I mean, it was a long time. It was a long trial, and listening to the different experts getting up and giving their opinions. And sometimes I would just sit there and think, you really think that? You really think that's what happened? How would you know? You weren't there. So I wish that there was a way that we could make it just a little bit more victim friendly, a little bit more survivor friendly. I would love to see the justice system be part of a survivor's healing journey, part of a step forward as they feel like, I may not ever fully have justice served, but at least I know that I've done everything that I can, and that this is one more thing I can put behind me. I would want it to lead to some sense of closure. I would love to see some kind of safeguards put in place to protect them from being re-traumatized, or I mean, there are amazing victim advocates that are, they are willing to give their soul to help victims. And I want to acknowledge that because they really do such a needed and amazing job. But I think we could be better. I think we can be more. Kind of going off of what was said earlier, we are only as good as we treat our most vulnerable members of society. And those are, yes, our elderly and our children. And we need to do a better job at it. And I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you if we do this, this, and this, it'll make our court systems better. But I don't have them. But I know that they need to be better.
Absolutely. Our systems have not been built for children, that's for sure. But as John said, I think we have taken some steps to try to better coordinate and improve kind of our investigative systems. And I do know that there's been work that's gone on in the criminal kind of legal system as well, trying to familiarize children with courtrooms, because these things are all very scary for children and really very challenging. And at the end of the day, not everybody even gets partial justice from kind of what has happened to them, which is really can be very challenging. So I often tell families that like they can't look to the kind of like the legal outcomes they shouldn't put all their eggs in those baskets, because we don't have control and they don't have control over that basket. And so we have to kind of find our healing in addition from other places. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn our attention now to an issue that has really plagued our child welfare systems for decades, and Kiana actually mentioned it in her introduction. But this year, this problem has gained both national and local attention, and that is the issue of racial disparities and disproportionality in our child welfare system. The issue is a complex one that involves many systemic factors such as poverty, but also racial bias. Personally, I've studied this issue and published on some of the medical contributions to the disparities. For example, how race affects child welfare reporting of young children with accidental injuries. I know that DHS in Philadelphia is beginning to think about these issues, and I hope that there are efforts at the state level. John, can you share with us any of the work that is being done at the state to address some of the racial disparities in child welfare?
Yep, absolutely. And thanks again for asking. And I think this is another example of that phrase we just said, which is our systems need to be better. So I think part of it is recognizing that there is inequities and that there is work that needs to be done at the systemic level. One thing, your question was really specific to child welfare, but I do want to take a moment to say that at the state, the Department of Human Services as a whole, which encompasses mental health and eligibility programs and beyond just child welfare, Secretary Miller has really taken this issue to heart over these last few months. Again, as you said, it's been a bit of an increased focus on this in the country over the last few months. This week, I could just share with you at DHS, at the state DHS, Department of Human Services, is what we're billing as Race Equity Action Week, where every day all of the DHS employees are receiving emails from the Secretary's office with articles and resources for staff, and discussions to consider our own roles in achieving equitable outcomes for the people we serve. So beyond just child welfare, these conversations are happening at the Department of Human Services level. I will let Waleska speak really specifically about what's happening in Philadelphia, but I'll make the point that our child welfare system is a county-based system, and it's really important for us at the state to participate and communicate and collaborate with our counties. Great work is happening. I can tell you that in Chester County today, they are having a full day training with Joyce James, who's a national expert in child welfare and institutional bias, and their leadership team is going through training today. Allegheny County just presented to our Child Welfare Council the work that's happening in Pittsburgh. So whereas we want to do work at the state level, part of our work is also encouraging and lifting up and coordinating work happening at the local level, because we know our communities are all different. And this is really a statewide conversation, but really change is going to have to happen at the local level. I do want to share that at the state level, we've been holding our own OCYF, Office of Children, Youth, and Families work groups, doing critical self-assessment, looking at some of the data, looking at our own hiring practices, looking at if you looked at our team in Harrisburg, we are not the most diverse team. So we have pulled together a diverse work group of volunteers from across the Office of Children, Youth, and Families from our regional offices in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Scranton, and having more internal conversations where we are looking at ourselves as a department, And we've really got two primary goals. One is to look at the data, be able to make recommendations for high-level impact strategies. Data was mentioned earlier. I'll give another data point that statewide, youth who identify as Black or African American are 14% of our population, but 35% of our foster care population. And if you go further deeper into the system, that only gets even more disproportionate with the length of stay in care. So we need to look at the data and really being able to understand how youth are experiencing our system and do that critical self-analysis to the root causes and why this is, so we can work on remedies. The other key thing we need to do is look at the products that we put out in terms of policy and programs, and we need to provide an equity lens to any new bulletins and policy and really the work that we do. We have to infuse equity into all the other working systems of our policy and programs. And so looking at ourselves and also looking at what we're putting out are really our current steps in terms of the work that we are doing at OCYF, along with helping to support the local communities. I would also just be remiss if I didn't mention, now I also oversee our juvenile justice system and really the disproportionate outcomes in juvenile justice. And I think that was mentioned earlier. I mentioned that 14% of our youth are identified as Black or African American, but really 62% of our youth in secure detention are Black, African American. And again, that is just something that should cause us to all sit back and look at our system from reports through the courts, through the placements and adjudications. And so we are looking at all that. The governor has developed a juvenile justice task force, of which I'm part of, to look at that as well. So we are looking at this very closely in terms of the Department of Human Services, Child Welfare, and Juvenile Justice.
Thank you so much, John. And Waleska, I'm going to turn to you. And could you talk to us a little bit about some of this work at the local level in our wonderful city of Philadelphia?
Yes, certainly. I'll start by saying that last year, the Department of Human Services here in Philadelphia, we embarked on a journey with the University of Pennsylvania, and Casey Family Programs to better address the ethno-racial disparities and disproportionality among children that were entering into our care. What we saw was that out of the 29,500 African-American children who were analyzed, 93% of them were actually diverted from formal child welfare services. 5% were accepted for in-home services, and 2% of the children entered placement. Those were some of the findings. As part of the study, we developed several strategies to address the overrepresentation of the African-American children in our child welfare system. Since one of the strategies was around, making sure that, we will look at the Child Protective Services reports that came through DHS via the mandated reporters. That strategy is actually, and is still in the process, we are actually looking at working in partnership with PADHS to review and critique the mandated reporting training. Given that most DHS reports are about neglect rather than abuse, and that there is no racial disproportionality begins with reports, additional training, we feel that additional training is needed for mandated reporters to address the implicit bias. Hotline alternatives are also something that we're looking for as something that we need to support families with multiple poverty stressors. We're also working with agencies such as the Department of Behavioral Health, the Health Department, the Office of Homeless Services, and the School District of Philadelphia to ensure that children and families receive services that prevent them from being formally accepted into our care. This is ongoing work. We are excited to have collaboration with the University of Pennsylvania and national partners like Casey Family Programs. And we just, we continue to look to working right alongside with you, Mr. Robin, with your leadership at the state level.
Thank you so much, Waleska. I am going to turn our attention to some kind of a few of the questions that I received from our audience. And I want to start by recognizing this, that those of you who are familiar with the adverse childhood experience studies that are really important public health studies that looked at exposure to adverse childhood conditions and their biological effect on adults later in life. might know that when children live in high-risk environments where there's physical abuse or sexual abuse, or there's domestic violence in the family, where a parent has substance abuse or mental health issues, when a parent has been incarcerated, all of the kind of risk factors that we think about, especially when children have been exposed to multiple of these kind of risk factors or adverse experience in childhood. The effects that that has continues throughout adulthood, and it has very significant biological effects on the human body. So the early theories that this was due to just bad decision making and not having social supports is not really the whole picture. The whole picture involves kind of the endocrine system in the body and the immune system in the body and the development of the brain for young children. And we know that that adults who have been exposed to these things as children have higher rates of lots of medical problems, higher rates of cancer, higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of obesity and diabetes, and lots of medical problems, and they have early mortality. So kind of this issue of trauma is so incredibly important, not only for children, but for adults as well. And so one of our questions, I'm going to start with Elizabeth. One of our audience members wanted to know, what is your personal advice for either identifying, limiting, or even dealing with childhood trauma? What are some of your overall thoughts about that?
That's a loaded question. I feel like, well, in dealing with it, I don't think there is a one size fits all. I don't think that what works for me will work for everyone else out there. I think each experience and each situation that we come across, it's very unique to that person. And because we're, for better, for worse, we're all unique individuals. And so it needs to be treated uniquely and individually. I mean, my healing journey, putting my trauma behind me, would probably look pretty different from the person. Well, if there was someone sitting next to me, the person sitting next to me. For me, it was perspective played a really large role in helping me to overcome my trauma. And sometimes I needed to be taken out of my current pothole in my pathway forward. And I had to take a step back and look at it. And a lot of times it was not even, it wasn't traditional therapy, although I am a fan of it, just in case anyone wonders. I think it does tremendous good, has tremendous ability to help people. But for me, kind of that, I don't know, step back from reality, that extra perspective that I needed was being outside. Something as simple as being outside, being out in nature, being away from school or friends, or being with someone that I trusted. Usually it was my grandpa. I was very close to him before he passed away. And he would take me horseback riding up in the mountains around Utah. And we didn't always have a whole lot of cell service, which as a teenager, I didn't love, but looking back, I think was quite a good thing and gave me that distance to be able to gain that perspective. And I mean, we didn't even always talk a whole lot. But he was actually a cancer specialist. He was an oncologist, and he studied it. And sometimes he talked to me about his findings, and that would pull me out of my problems far enough to be able to look back and be like, you know what? My life is not so bad. My life is actually, like, yes, I had 9 months that were horrendous, but overall, I've had 16 or 17 years that have ultimately been really good. And I know this seems like very disconnected, but it all made sense in my mind, and it helped me move forward. And I guess my point is that as we put the trauma behind us, I think it is so important to find those positive therapies. And it's not always traditional therapy. Kind of what I was saying earlier, there are so many different kinds out there. I mean, there's equine therapy, animal therapy, EMDR, there's family systems therapy, there's like a whole therapy on studying the somatic release through movement of abuse. there's just so much available to us that I feel like we really need to educate ourselves more on and explore more, because we are unique and we each need our individual way forward. And what speaks to me might not speak to someone else. And finding those positive and uplifting outlets, I think, is also incredibly important, because for as many words as we have in the English language, sometimes even still, there are not enough words to articulate how we feel. And so being able to find those emotional releases, whether that is like going for a 20-mile run, or it's listening to music, or it's sitting down and talking it out with someone, they're all acceptable, positive. Acceptable is not even the right word. I don't even have the right words to. Once again, I'm at a loss for words in the English language, which is shocking, especially for me. But just finding these positive outlets that are there, finding ways to draw us back into the present, give ourselves some perspective. And once again, I'm speaking from my own experience, but finding what works for you. And then not just turning to it when you need help, not just turning to it when you feel overwhelmed, but turn to it while you're healthy. Have it be sort of like a maintenance and instead of a fix when something goes wrong.
So there are a few things that you said that really made me chuckle inside almost, that kind of like not having the words for it, and also the importance of nature. It's going to bring me to my next question. But I actually was emailing with a dear friend of mine who lives in Sweden, and there's a word that I cannot pronounce. It's a Swedish word that means life outdoors. And it's about how when the weather turns cold, a lot of the population in some of the Scandinavian countries, they go outside, they spend time in nature, and how important that really is for everybody's kind of well-being and mental health. And it reminds me of kind of where we are right now, which is in the middle of a pandemic. And so I'm going to ask kind of Waleska, actually, this question from another audience member, and that is, how is this pandemic, where we can't really be out and about like we would like to be, contributing to the unbalanced mental health of our children? And can you think of some ways to combat or to help children better cope through this pandemic? And I'm going to open it up, Waleska, to you, to John, to anybody who has some comments or thoughts about that.
Yeah, the pandemic. Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, the pandemic is definitely contributing to a lot of factors that actually include mental health issues that we're finding not just with the adults, but now children too. We have seen that because of the lack of outside interaction, whether it's interaction with their friends or whether it's interactions with, with just nature, right? A lot of kids are going into, many times depression. Some of the things that we are currently doing at the local level are things around making sure that, when we're engaging in a platform like this one, whether it's Zoom or, whether any platform that we engage with, whether it's with the parent or whether it's with the child, we are promoting the use and importance of being outside, taking a few minutes to go outside, take a walk. As you take a walk, protect yourself, but take that walk, because that is, by taking that walk and engaging in some sort of physical activity, even if it's a small basketball or, baseball sort of game between you and your child, that can help a lot. It can get them out of what's happening virtually. So we do encourage a lot of ways for parents and children to go outside, doing that very safely.
Thank you. John, do you have any additional comments?
Yep, let me just quickly add, again, I don't think there's any substitute for the being fully connected, being present together and being outside, but we also have tried to encourage the system, the child welfare agencies, to increase connection virtually, so that even though this isn't better, we're glad to be together on Zoom, it's really important that we continue to do the things that we should be doing like this. But the silver lining maybe is that because we're doing virtual, we can do much more. We can be together more frequent. And maybe it's only 10 minutes instead of a full hour, but we also didn't drive an hour to get there. We also we've encouraged like the increase of the frequency and the sort of the connectivity to families in our child welfare system, because the virtual system does allow for that. And so I think there's maybe we should always be looking for the opportunity, how to take the crisis and make it an opportunity, and what can we use this new platform for to increase and improve our service.
And to try to find a few silver linings in a time that has been really so difficult for so many children and families. When I think about the pandemic, I think that my life has really changed so much. I would never be coming to you from my den. I would normally be at Children's Hospital, but when I'm not on call, I'm in my home, and my home is a haven. It really makes me stop and think that for some children, their home is not their haven. And so for those children, it really, they depend on us, of other adults, for really doing our very best to support them, to support their parents and families. I think our time is up right now. I could go on and on for another 2 hours, but they didn't give me another 2 hours. I want to thank John and Waleska for your time, your expertise, and all of your work. And Elizabeth, it's been an incredible pleasure and honor to speak with you this afternoon. You are a wonderful spokesperson for children and for adults who have been victims of maltreatment. And I think we are really lucky to have you as one of our spokespeople, and somebody who really can help educate our entire country about these incredibly important and challenging issues. I'd like to also thank APM for inviting me to moderate. This is not my day job. I'm not a moderator, but I may have a new career. I don't know. If you would like to support the good work that APM is doing in child protective services arena, we encourage you to visit their website and make a donation. Just go to apmphila.org, click Get Involved, and then donate. I also want to remind everybody that the Pennsylvania Child Line, the hotline, receives referrals of suspected child abuse and general child well-being concerns 24 hours a day, every day of the week. If you are concerned with a child's well-being, please pick up and call the hotline at 1-800-932-0312, or maybe 0313. That was the number.
Yeah, it should be
Yeah, that's my
0313.
number. In fact, I have that number memorized. So make that 2 a 3, please. It's 1-800-932-0313. Okay, that's a number I've had memorized for decades. Or you may submit information on the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services website noted on your screen. APM is always looking for compassionate families to join their mission to enhance the lives of children in need. I think one of the things that Elizabeth said today, which was that your family may not be your biological family, but everyone should have family, is incredibly important message. And if you'd like to learn more about being part of a family for a child, about becoming a foster parent, please call 267-296-7285. Or for more information about adoption, call 267-507-1326. You can also contact the Pennsylvania Statewide Adoption and Permanency Network, SWAN, and I think that their website address is up there, www.adoptpakids.org, or you can call 1-800-585-SWAN. Or finally, you can contact APM directly. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that our efforts to raise awareness of this serious issue in our city and state and offer possible solutions to keep children safe was worth and well worth your time. And I hope that we have accomplished our goals with our programming. Now join me in welcoming back APM President and CEO, Nilda Ruiz. Nilda, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Wow, wow, wow. How powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Christian and Elizabeth. Oh my God. You think you know it, and it's so, it was so powerful. John and Waleska, thank you so much. What an amazing discussion and great information. My takeaway, like you said, Dr. Christian, is, the human spirit is resilient. And yes, we can overcome these adversities, as we just heard from Elizabeth. And I loved your saying, find your family, those who build you up. It may not be your biological family, but they are out there, people who do care. So thank you so much. This was very enriching. So at the beginning, I had talked about, this is our 50th anniversary. This is the last of our speaker series. You can go and see any of the 4, behavioral health, on early childhood education, or community and economic development, or this one. You can just go to our website and you'll find that information. Our celebratory events, which was our big gala and our sugarcane festival, had to be postponed because of the pandemic, but 51 will be our new 50th. So I want to invite everybody to come to our sugarcane festival, which will be June 12th at 6 and Diamond. And I'm sure after this pandemic, we're all looking forward to getting all decked out and to our Black Tie Event Gala, which will be June 26th at the Fillmore. So I hope that you will join us in these celebratory events. Hopefully the pandemic will be behind us and we'll be ready to party and have a good time. Thank you all again. Remember, APM is for everyone, and that includes you. I wish you and your familia a safe and healthy season. Nos vemos pronto. We hope to see you soon. Be well and stay healthy. Thank you again.